Just before Grandstand here on BBC One, time to find out what the weather holds in store with Peter Cockcroft. Your weekend fix of sport now on BBC One in Grandstand with Steve Ryder and Sue Barker.
News in the southeast now on BBC One. With bolt of lightning sends robot number 5 AWOL with a childish taste for mischief now on BBC One. Madcap misadventure in Short Circuit.
It's all action at Holby General in 20 minutes. First on BBC One, may the voice be with you. Patching up the casualties of love and war now on BBC One to Holby A&E.
Now on BBC One, time to open up this week's Country File with John Craven. You're watching BBC One on the record. Now on BBC One, a chance to catch up with the week's events in Albert Square.
A fantasy love story for Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour now on BBC One, sweeping away their 60-year separation to meet somewhere in time. Before that on BBC One, the nation's favourite love poem with Mark Owen. It's all style for BBC One now. Sunday's Southeast News now on BBC One with Gargi Patel. Well-mature comedy, Last of the Summer Wine in 25 minutes on BBC One. After Harvest Songs of Praise with Pam Rhodes.
Can Compo believe his ears? Has Nora got the hots for him at last now on BBC One?
Things are at an all-time low for the Jacksons. On BBC One, a new series, Carol Vorderman investigates the unexplained.
With BBC One, and there's no purchase necessary. First on BBC One, the animal hospital tackles the problems that come with a large litter. Constructing a plan for revenge, now on BBC One, The Locksmith.
For the weekend on BBC One, village life is shattered, rebellious behaviour and a vicious killing in Bright Hare.
Attempting to save her daughter from a life of sleaze in a seedy underworld, Lindsay Wagner stars in tonight's film drama now on BBC One, based on a true story.
The Close Show is in 50 minutes. First on BBC One, let's hit the road to London. Here on BBC One, it's Ooh La La for the Close.
What to look out for if you want to avoid the brush-off now on BBC One with Juliette Morris. Here and now. One before that, poor old Bianca's feeling a bit down, but she can always rely on Ricky, can't she?
Before that on BBC One, a new series of Face Value with Alice Beer. Pop group China Black join Carol Smiley for the midweek lottery draw in half an hour on BBC One, and that's after Crime Beat with Martin Lewis.
Here on BBC One, a weekend away with Hyacinth. Crikey, what a
to cry on. First on BBC One, Here and Now with Juliette Morris. Here on BBC One now, Dell paints himself into a corner.
Rescues.
A caring doctor played by Nigel Havers now on BBC One and causing problems for Dangerfield.
Does that matter? Here and now.
And into the fire for Dangerfield.
Not nice having icicles in your crevices, especially when you're laid up in bed. Time to warm the proverbials now on BBC One in Get Well Soon.
A summary of the news now on BBC One with Jill Dando. Life's a mere charade here on BBC One.
More than a kind gesture now.
You're watching BBC One.
Real-life heroism in half an hour in 999 Lifesavers. First, the polls are closed and the ballots have been counted.
About to be put through their Halen paces now on BBC One, a new series for Gareth and Norman, Jobs for the Boys.
A summary of the news now on BBC One. On BBC One now, one man in charge, two teams of four, all acting their little socks off. If you haven't got it by now, you need more practice. So go on, give us a clue.
Dreams of leaving now on BBC One, real for some, traumatic and scary for others. It's a tough day in Casualty.
Outsmarting each other as the order.
Their feet in half an hour. Today's teams on Give Us a Clue. In the chair on BBC One now, it's Bob Holness.
The heat is on for BBC One now, but just what will come out of the bag?
Big trouble brewing for the Mitchells in EastEnders in half an hour on BBC One. That's after we join John Craven in Africa to meet the hairy little orphans at the Animal Sanctuary.
Steven, Nick Hancock and David Essex, some of the star names of the comic relief football team, playing an away game in Africa here on BBC One in half an hour after The World's Strongest Man.
First, back with a new series on BBC One, and in vintage form, 3 happy wanderers feeling inventive.
Keeping it in the family now on BBC One, Jim Davidson's Generation Game.
Off the blocks now on BBC One for another Question of Sport with Sue Barker.
On Call with the Cabbies now on BBC One, pay the fare, get the banter with Cresta Cars.
Considered a bit of a pest here on BBC One, her ladyship, Hyacinth Bouquet.
A European first for Children's Hospital, a groundbreaking transplant operation in half an hour, here on BBC One.
Forbidden love becomes even more entangled. A dangerous police operation in Undercover Heart, 9:30, here on BBC One.
An assassin's loose in the hospital. Quincy take cover on BBC One in 25 minutes after Neighbour.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's facing the unlikely prospect of giving birth, with Danny DeVito and Emma Thompson standing by to help him push. Comedy now on BBC One, Junior.
This is BBC One. Grandstand is coming up in 5 minutes after a news summary from Moira Stewart.
Now on BBC One, the news with Moira Stewart. So now on BBC One, before the Generation Game, we're talking French, or something like it.
Trouble in and outside the wards now on BBC One as a Green protest goes wrong and Eve and Charlie clash in Casualty. You're watching BBC One, where members of the royal family join the nation to commemorate those who laid down their lives. This year's Festival of Remembrance. And we're running just over 5 minutes later than scheduled here on BBC One after the commemoration at the Royal Albert Hall. Now, top action from today's match at Villa Park between Villa and Spurs with Desmond Lynam and Match of the Day.
This is BBC One. Now from the Cenotaph in London, Remembrance Sunday, introduced by Tom Fleming. At 2:25 this afternoon, Hayley Mills stars in the film classic Pollyanna. Before that, BBC One's off to Walford to catch up on the week's events in Albert Square.
Cartoon fun now on BBC One on the Isle of Pingo Pongo. Children in Need Night is on Friday, November the 20th, and fundraising is well underway. But who are the children who need your help? Gabby Roslin's been finding out. This programme contains dramatic reconstructions of domestic violence.
An intelligence service decoding centre is this evening's venue for the Antiques Roadshow in half an hour. First on BBC One, Howard's making eyes at Pearl, last of the summer wine. First, the spectacular reef in the exotic waters off Borneo, Wildlife on One. The Sunday night drama now on BBC One, and neither the lecherous Sir Pitt nor his dashing son Rawdon can resist Becky Sharp as we continue Thackeray's classic Vanity Fair.
Now on BBC One, living together can be difficult, especially on a certain street in Australia.
How did she cope with it all? Memories of Safi at 9:30 as the Ab Fab collection continues here on BBC One. Made with the finest material, first on BBC One, an exclusive viewing of the Ab Fab collection. Now on BBC One, talking exclusively to Prince Charles and his friends, Gavin Hewitt reports for Panorama.
Now on BBC One, something or someone is going to have to go.
One at the new regular time of 8 o'clock, Let Yourself Go, with Jill Dando. Inside the Strange and Unexplained now on BBC One, Carol Vorderman returns for a new series of mysteries. Now on BBC One, QED looks at the science of a beautiful but very dangerous sport.
Carl, you've really messed up, so where next? Neighbours now on BBC One.
The day's news in the southeast, first on BBC One with Gwennon Edwards and Mike. Here on BBC One now, the meat eaters of the bird world. Fancy winning $1 million now on BBC One? You'll be lucky. They say that dreams can come true, first on BBC One. Margaret can always live in hope. Pursuit of Talents, first on BBC One. Victoria Wood is the best of British.
Could Dislike Turn to Love in EastEnders in half an hour, first on BBC One. If you've got a problem, who are you going to call? Mrs Awkward and Watchdog. Here on BBC One in half an hour, zookeeper Ginty has a chance to become more closely acquainted with the gorillas. First, it's Animal Hospital. Here on BBC One, tons of food are being prepared for a zoo full of hungry animals. It's all in a day's work for Zookeeper. Brand new comedy for Thursday night now on BBC One as we whisk you to a factory canteen on the outskirts of Manchester. Award-winning Victoria Wood stars in her new series, Dinner Lady. Before question time in half an hour on BBC One, some ripe language as Dave Allen joins Clive Anderson. Or Robbie Williams and E17 join Katie Hill for Top of the Pops in half an hour on BBC One. That's after Anne Robinson and Weekend Watchdog. Big Friday night film tonight on BBC One with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Go It Alone Commando at 10:25. Now this week's Top of the Pops. In half an hour on BBC One, Ainsley's serving up bangers and mash in tonight's Party of a Lifetime. That's after a pair of couples from Sheffield risk changing. First on BBC One, there's a serpent loose in an English Eden. Nigel Havers is the man attempting to solve a crime of blackmail and betrayal. Dangerfield. That's after tonight's action thriller on BBC One, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. When murder triggers an international crisis, there's only one man who can sort it. Commando.
Live and uninterrupted, Grandstand on BBC One with Steve Ryder.
Here on BBC One in half an hour, an escaped killer who Mulder and Scully have come across before seems to be on a fox hunt. And that's after the airport turns into something out of a Hitchcock film. Trust no one, and especially not a serial killer. Vet in practice, Truda Mostew takes a break from handling animals and tries handling McCoist and Macaulay at midnight. First on BBC One, Match of the Day with Desmond Lynham.
A brand new Sunday tea time drama series now on BBC One based on a famous story. Children of the New Forest. Compo and crew are in search of hidden forces in Last of the Summer Wine in 35 minutes. First on BBC One, Songs of Praise with Pam Rhodes.
Teaching a priest to be a bingo caller turns out to be quite difficult in Ballykissangel in half an hour. First on BBC One, the real story of one of Britain's most elusive creatures.
A big red book with someone's name on it, first on BBC One. But whose? One. Now, a panorama investigation by Mark Killick.
And Clearly Dangerous right now on BBC One, telling stories that are best not told.
EastEnders in half an hour. First on BBC One, David Seaman and John Virgo compete in the kitchen in Celebrity Ready Steady Cook.
Now on BBC One, a tough task for Billy in Neighbours.
Before we fly the carry-on flag, the best of British starts on BBC One with a man who's been rocking and rolling for the last 40 years, Cliff Richard.
When the army think they've found an unexploded bomb, the four-legged evacuees are sent to the animal hospital. That's in half an hour here on BBC One. First on BBC One, the language gets as fruity as the puddings as the dinner ladies prepare for a special visitor.
Your Saturday afternoon sorted now on BBC One. Grandstand with Steve Ryder at Murrayfield.
This is BBC One Through the Night with BBC News 24.
Like Rick has put his foot in it again, EastEnders in half an hour on BBC One after Holiday with Jill Dando.
Play the game with Jonathan Ross. They think it's all over on BBC One after a shocker from the kitchen. Through the Night now on BBC One with BBC News 24.
Violence, cannibalism, and to cap it all off, Dorian's empty boot. A compromising situation for the birds of a feather in half an hour on BBC One. Before that, it's the calm before the storm. EastEnders.
First on BBC One, Mary's determined to discover who the father of Ruth's baby is in EastEnders.
Is Lady Luck with you tonight? This is BBC One, and here's Carol Smiley.
Into the future, first on BBC One with Tomorrow's World.
First on BBC One, Match of the Day with Ray Stubbs. Daryl's finding life behind bars pretty tough. Hopefully the birds of a feather will cheer him up in half an hour. First on BBC One, there's someone else who could do with a lift.
Now on BBC One, if your summer holiday involves the trip to Cornwall, Carol Smiley has some tips.
As yet unseen, Auntie Airs has smashing new bloomers at 7 here on BBC One after Jim Davidson's New Year Generation game.
Real life medicine now as BBC One goes live to City Hospital.
John Virgo's suffering a bit now on BBC One, but it's possible Jim may just have the answer. This is BBC One, and Lance's lucky streak just keeps on coming.
Now on BBC One, Weekend Watchdog with Anne Robinson in widescreen.
This is BBC One, in the heart of the country. To Ramsey Street now on BBC One, and how's Anne going to take it?
Amy wants oranges.